on this episode of The Greatest Night in Pop, there was this scene where Prince was accepting an award at the American Music Awards, and the category was Best Black Single. So I just thought that was really interesting. I've always had this gripe about the industry and how I think they've segregated genres by race in order for us not to have to compete. So I'm just curious, what were your thoughts seeing that as an artist? Yeah.
First of all, my mouth dropped because this was just the 80s. And it was just very bold of them to do. And I went down a rabbit hole after it just to see like why this was happening in the 80s. Apparently before it was urban, I think, or maybe they changed it to urban that following year. But whatever it was, I think Lionel Richie and Michael Jackson both had Michael Jackson. It was Lionel Richie and Prince that both had albums and the lines were blurred. So like you said, in order for them to not be considered for a rock album or whatever or pop or any other genre, like you said, where they would have to compete against everyone, they divided these categories up by race. So that's the only space that they could exist in. Mm-hmm. And then that next year they changed it to urban, which is the same way to basically say black. And is it still considered urban now? Like, how do they break those categories down now? Do you know?
They have radio formats. You have urban AC, which is an urban adult contemporary. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the urban word has been thrown around a lot. And that all comes from them putting black people in the inner city, mm-hmm. in urban areas versus suburban areas. So yeah, that's all it means, because typically we were the people who had to live in the worst parts of the city where the factories were downtown, train tracks, that whole thing. So.
Yep. And even before that, they were calling them race records. Like when you think about the origin of music and how black people, like Beyonce, for example, with her country album, and some people saying, oh, country, and automatically assuming that it was a genre that was started by white people. Yeah. But if you go all the way back, it was black people who created these genres. Most of the genres, rock, Chuck Berry, all of these different artists who predated their white counterparts. And then they used the term race records to split and divide. The same thing that they did with the award show, so that they wouldn't have to compete with their black counterparts. And yeah, I think it's really unfair. I'm surprised that it's not more of a conversation even now, because you think about Justin Timberlake's 2020 experience. Like, I love that project, but he was able to exist on pop charts and be considered for pop awards and R&B because he has the privilege of being white. But if Usher had made that same exact project, it would have automatically been classified as the genre that it sounded like, which is R&B.
Yeah. And that's the whole thing with black artists. The terms in the industry is always like, you have to cross over. You have to cross over into pop radio.
Whereas white people, it's their birthright. Like, they don't have to cross over.
You're just automatically, if you're a white singer or ambiguously race white singer without a very distinctive R&B chorus, then it's like automatically. But yeah, I think it goes even deeper than that. Back in the day when they were stealing our records, they were literally doing
covers.
Technically it was covers, but they weren't acting like they were covers. They were redoing these records and posing as the writers and producers of these songs, and not necessarily giving credit to the original writers. So in order to not hear these same songs sung by two different people, where you're going to have to I like this version better, and not seeing who it is, then they had to create another space for us to exist in on our own. And yeah, that segregation, while it can be beautiful for us to build in our own spaces, just really caps us off from our bigger audiences when white people already make up 60% of the country. So it's just really unfair especially for R&B artists and people who sing, who are no different than an Ariana Grande or a Katy Perry or Adele, who has very similar records and very similar stylings, who won't get on half the radio stations that she will get on. It's something that we have to keep calling out, and I don't think it's enough pressure put onto the award shows and the radio stations to change this very racist formatting.
On top of the fact that what happens 9 times out of 10 is the white artists, like you said, they automatically get to be on the pop stations. They automatically get the wide exposure. But then when they want to enter black spaces, they'll just get Snoop Dogg or Bun B or whoever they want and do a remix version of their songs for like street cred. It's just so y'all can get us to cross over. But I guess that's like what Lil Nas X had to do when he had Old Town Road. He had to get validated by a white artist, by Billy Ray Cyrus, in order to even be considered. And it's, even we were talking about this before too, but with black artists, once we exist in a certain genre, then we're like pigeonholed there. Even if sonically we do not sound like what it is they're trying to classify us in. So Tyler, the Creator, made an album where it wasn't all hip hop. He was experimenting with so many things, but because he's black and because he already did hip hop, they're considering him a hip hop artist. Or Childish Gambino, he made a whole funk project, but he's still considered a hip hop rapper, whatever. And it's, we shouldn't be defined by our race. We should be defined by the art that we make, and you should be able to listen to it and decide on genre, not look at it and decide on genre. And that's exactly what's happening. Then what they blatantly did at the American Music Awards.
I don't know how important genres are, though. I get it in some spaces, but there's some music that don't necessarily just fit a genre. And so
I think genres are important.
I think there needs to be more melting pots of all types of music together to allow people to really see what they gravitate towards. I think it's necessary in some programming and playlisting spaces if you're trying to listen to a certain vibe, but it still gets very tricky for me, and I don't think people are exposed. And I can even say that about myself because I listen to other black artists. I had to listen to one station in my hometown, so all the other music I didn't know. So I think there's something to that.
So what do they do then? What's the gauge then of how to classify music? Because there has to be some sort of classification for you to
how you feel. It's just how you feel.
But that's subjective.
Exactly. All of it's subjective. For you to say it's a good or bad song is subjective. To say this person shouldn't be on that song is subjective.
I just mean as far as how you classify the genre, like, because I'm sure there's got to be some sort of like gauge of, like I said, 2020 Experience. We knew that was an R&B project from listening to it. So there's certain musical elements or certain instrumentations or the way you sing something that classifies genre.
Yeah, it won't ever go that way. Pop is not a genre. It never has been. It literally stands for popular.
Which technically hip hop should be pop music because it's more popular than other.
Well, not this past year or so. It's not.
What's the most popular genre?
I don't know, but hip hop is no longer.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. The more
I
you
think
know.
they said sales were down like 40% from 2022.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know. I would have to have stats in front of me, like how many albums were released, which artists released those albums, what non-hip hop artists released albums that year. Like, it's a lot of factors, so I can't really say. Okay. But yeah, genres are weird.
Genres are super weird. Yeah, we need to start being able to listen to music without looking at it. And that would solve a lot of problems. And then force you to decide what genre things are in. Could you imagine?
And force you to say who's actually better.